3 days after their son Tommy vanished into the forest without a trace, a fox began appearing at Sarah's and Michael's window. It pawed at the glass as if trying to communicate by knocking. Driven by the desperate need to find their son, they decided to follow it, leading to a discovery beyond their wildest imagination. Will their discovery lead them to Tommy? But before we start, smash the like button and make sure to subscribe if you haven't, and hit that notification bell so that you won't miss any new stories. 3 days had passed since Michael and Sarah's son Tommy disappeared. The police had no leads, and the small town of Redwood Falls was under a pall of silence and suspicion. Each night, as their despair grew, a fox with strikingly intense eyes appeared at their living room window, tapping the glass softly with a paw, as if trying to deliver a message. On the fourth night, Michael watched from the sofa, his eyes locked on the fox's movements. It was peculiar that this animal behaved with such purpose. "Maybe it's a sign," Sarah whispered next to him, her voice shaky with mingled hope and fear. Together they decided, if the fox returned tomorrow, they would follow it. The next evening, as the sky painted with sunset hues, the fox appeared again, its knocks more urgent. Without hesitation, Michael and Sarah grabbed their coats and a flashlight. They stepped into the cool evening, their hearts pounding with a cocktail of fear and anticipation. It led them through familiar streets, then veered into the woods that bordered their town. The underbrush was thick and thorns tugged at their clothes. They could barely keep up with the fox's brisk pace. The woods opened to a clearing they had never seen before, even though they'd lived in Redwood Falls all their lives. In the center, a dilapidated cabin, overrun with vines, stood eerily silent. The fox stopped staring at the cabin before vanishing into the thick woods. Could Tommy be there? Michael's voice was hopeful, yet laced with fear. Approaching the cabin, the old wood creaked under their weight. Inside, it was dust and shadows, but on a dusty table lay a child's red cap, undeniably Tommy's. Sarah's knees nearly buckled at the sight. "He was here," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. The cap was a promise, a clue that he was still out there. As they prepared to leave, Michael noticed a photograph pinned against the wall. It showed a group of people, among them a man who bore a surprisingly striking resemblance to Sarah. Who are these people? He wondered aloud as Sarah made her way to his side to study the picture. "I have no idea," she whispered, eyes locked on the unknown man who looked so much like her. Leaving the cabin, they marked the spot on their GPS and decided to return with the police in the morning. That night, both of them lay awake, the image of the photograph and Tommy's red cap haunting them. Who was that man in the picture? Morning brought no relief. The police combed the cabin and the surrounding area, but came up empty. No new clues or leads surfaced, and both the photograph and the man remained a mystery. "We need to understand this place," Sarah said determinedly when Michael looked at her in despair. "Let's talk to the older townspeople. Someone has to know something about this cabin." Their first stop was Mr. Abernathy, the town historian who lived in a cluttered house filled with books and papers. He listened intently, his eyes narrowing when he saw the photograph. "Ah, that cabin," he murmured, thumbing through an old ledger. "It's been abandoned for decades, but it used to be." His voice trailed off, eyes going vacant as if he was remembering an untold pain. Sarah and Michael gave Mr. Abernathy a moment to collect his thoughts before pressing him further. "What can you tell us about the cabin?" Michael prompted, his voice tinged with urgency. Mr. Abernathy, clearing his throat, pointed to a faded map on the wall. "Let me show you exactly where it stands," he said, unrolling the map across his cluttered desk. They inquired about the cabin's origins and ownership, showing intense curiosity about its history. "This land was first claimed by one of our earliest settlers," Mr. Abernathy explained, tracing a line with his finger on the map. Mr. Abernathy shared that the cabin was once owned by a pioneering family foundational to Redwood Falls. "The Harrisons," he said, the name resonating with the weight of history. They were instrumental in setting up the initial structures of our community. The Harrisons established the first mill and a trading post here, he noted, pointing to a spot on the map. Their efforts helped shape the town's future, attracting other families to settle here. He suggested that Sarah and Michael visit the town archives for more comprehensive information. You'll find all the public records there, newspapers, land deeds, family registers, he explained, pointing them towards the large building at the end of Main Street. Sarah nodded, jotting down the details in her notebook, determined to leave no stone unturned. As they left, Michael whispered, "He knows more than he's saying, Sarah." She agreed, but also felt that the archives might hold the key. With resolve, Sarah and Michael arrived at the town archives, determined to uncover anything useful. They approached the main desk, their determination palpable in the quiet, dusty room filled with the past. They requested access to all documents related to the founding family from the archival clerk. "We need everything on the Harrisons," Michael stated firmly. The clerk nodded. As the clerk fetched voluminous files, anticipation grew about what they might reveal. They spread the papers across the large table, each piece potentially hiding details of their son's whereabouts. As they sifted through records, the couple noted any discrepancies or anomalies in family histories. "Look at this," Sarah pointed out. "The dates on these transactions don't line up." They made notes of any inconsistencies that could indicate hidden stories or overlooked details relevant to their search. They highlighted this and other similar entries, piecing together a pattern that might lead to clues. The detailed archival work was slow but necessary, as each file could hold a crucial piece of the puzzle. In a quiet archive corner, they started with the founding family's extensive tree, large, intricate charts spread across the table, tracing generations of Harrisons. Michael pointed to the various branches, noting significant dates and marriages, while Sarah cross-referenced them with other documents they had gathered. They identified the man from the cabin photo in an old family tree chart. "That's him," Sarah said, pointing at a faded photograph pasted next to a name. The man's features were unmistakable now that they saw him in the context of the Harrison family lineage. Sarah exclaimed in recognition, which drew Michael's attention to another intriguing document. "Michael, look at this," she called out, holding up a brittle letter dated several decades ago. It mentioned the cabin and a gathering, hinting at a secret meeting. Michael reviewed a different file, finding a potential link to Sarah's ancestors. "This land grant application has your great-grandfather's signature," he said, showing her a document. The name matched, and it was dated around the same time as the earliest Harrison records. This could mean that Sarah's family and the Harrisons were more closely connected than they thought. The documents laid out a network of marriages and business ties between their ancestors and the Harrisons, clearly documenting a shared history that neither had known before. This linkage implied a deeper historical connection between Sarah's lineage and the town's pioneers. They looked at each other in amazement. "Our families helped build this town together," Michael said, his voice filled with awe. The couple pondered the implications of their families' entwined pasts. "Could this connection be why Tommy... Maybe there's something about these lands, or an old family feud," Michael speculated as they went through old maps and legal disputes documented years ago. Armed with new knowledge, they decided to revisit the cabin as a potential source of further clues. Michael nodded, his determination renewed by the day's revelations. Determined, they gathered their findings and set out for the cabin once more. Maps, old photographs, and documents were packed into their backpacks. They planned to explore deeper into the forest, hoping to find more than before. "Last time, we barely scratched the surface," Sarah remarked as they reviewed the map. They marked potential areas of interest with pins, areas that could have been significant to their ancestors, and possibly to Tommy's disappearance. As they approached the cabin, memories of their first visit mixed with renewed determination. The path, once unfamiliar and foreboding, now seemed like an old challenge returning. "We're not just following a map, we're following a history," Sarah whispered, pushing aside a branch as they made their way deeper into the heart of the woods. Sarah clutched the photo, comparing it against the fading light, trying to spot the exact angles and landmarks it captured, hoping it would guide them correctly this time. The forest grew darker around them, and they realized they had become lost. "Are you sure this was the right way?" Sarah asked, a note of panic in her voice as she shined her flashlight deeper into the thicket. Sarah expressed her fear, but was suddenly interrupted by a familiar animal sound. It was the soft, sharp tapping of a fox, a sound they hadn't heard since their last venture here. They stopped in their tracks, listening intently. The rhythmic tapping seemed deliberate, as if calling them to attention. The fox from earlier reappeared, signaling them to follow it deeper into the woods. With no better plan and the path unclear, Michael nodded to Sarah, and they decided to trust the creature that had once led them to clues. They hesitated, but the urgency of their situation drove them to trust the fox's guidance. Following the fox led them to a new clearing after hours of tense navigation. The dense foliage suddenly opened up to reveal a moonlit glade. A stern man confronted them, aiming a weapon and demanding they stop advancing. "Who are you and what are you doing here?" he barked, his posture tense. Sarah and Michael froze, their hearts pounding. Sarah pleaded with the man, showing him the photo and Tommy's cap as proof of their desperate search. "Please, we're just looking for our son." The man's eyes flicked to the photo, then to the cap, his expression unreadable. She explained their plight, hoping to gain the man's trust and assistance. The man revealed himself as a descendant of the founding family's lost patriarch. "My ancestors settled these lands," he began, his voice resonating with a pride that echoed the surroundings. "And like them, I chose to stay away from the chaos of modern life." He explained their choice to live isolated from modern society, seeking a simpler life. "We live by the old ways, connected to the land," he continued, leading them through the dense trees to a hidden part of the forest. The community he led had found Tommy wandering in the woods and had taken him in. "He was lost and alone, but he's safe now," the man assured them, as he guided them towards a small, warmly lit cabin where laughter and voices could be heard. Sarah and Michael were overwhelmed with relief and gratitude as they were reunited with Tommy. The boy ran into their arms, his face alight with joy and surprise. Tears and laughter mingled as they held him close, the weight of their fears melting away. "I knew you'd come," Tommy said, his voice muffled against his mother's shoulder. The family's reunion marked a new beginning, intertwined with the history of Redwood Falls and its founding myths. As they walked back through the woods, the cabin fading behind them, Michael said, "Our family story is here, isn't it? Part of this town's lore." They nodded to each other, their journey not just ending, but evolving into a new chapter of their lives together.